Welcome to Let's Bring It In, the podcast where we dive into the stories that have shaped us as athletes, competitors, and teammates. I'm Coach Kathy Devaney, and here we're talking with athletes of all ages, coaches, parents, and even referees. Because in your world of sports and your competitive experience, it always boils down to stories. So grab a seat, lean in, and let's bring it in. So welcome to my very first episode of Let's Bring It In. I am so thrilled and excited that Coach Lou Ferreira has decided and agreed to join me. We're going to dive right in. Lou, tell me who you are, where you come from, and why you said yes to this.
Lou Ferreira. So back in the day, I was Lou Poor. But my journey has been a long one. And why I'm sitting here with you right now is a wonderful text message that you sent me explaining to me what you were doing, which I know is a dream and vision you've had for a lot of years. And I thought there's no way I can say no. There's no way I can say no to this, because for me to be a part of what you are putting together, I feel very honored. So
Wonderful. So let's lead that right into what you're doing now. Is you've kind of come full circle as a coach and a woman who's passionate about soccer. So let's go backward in that circle and start by telling me your journey as an elite soccer player.
Yeah. It goes back a long time. I can say growing up as a youth athlete, I grew up in that time of, Title IX, like right before that all, hit. And I was a little tomboy, and I was playing every sport possible, every sport you could imagine.
Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Tampa, Florida. Actually, a town on the outskirts called Land O'Lakes is sort of where I began most of my athletics. And we moved there when I was quite young. I was born in Massachusetts and grew up in the Florida area, Tampa area in Florida. And I was playing every sport I could possibly play because I was just a tomboy. And I had the God-given gift of athleticism. I was fast and I was athletic, and I had great coordination. So every sport I could play, I played. What I was drawn to in all of that was more of the team sport aspect. There was a few individual sports like tennis that I did, but it was mostly the team sports.
Can you remember why? What drew you to the concept of being part of a team so young?
Yeah, well, for me, it was I loved being with my friends. That was it. And honestly, for me, most of my friends were boys because there were not a lot of girls playing sports then. Yeah. It was really different.
What are we talking about? This the early 80s?
Well, for me, I'm born 1970, so
Okay.
This was through the late 70s, early 80s, right? And it was just, if you wanted to play a sport, most of the sports, it was all boys. Right. Unless you were doing something like volleyball or track and field, your sport that had a specific, kind of female aspect to it. A lot of the sports didn't. And those were the sports that I loved. So, for me, it was instead of playing softball, I played baseball with the boys, right? Football, I played tackle football, padded tackle football. And then soccer was just sort of that next sort of team sport that came up for me. And I was about, 8 years old when I started.
Were there other girls at the same time? You were on your own?
None.
In Florida in the late 70s, early 80s,
Yep.
you were the lone female. I was often the lone female as well, but that was the mid 70s. So you're just behind me timeline wise. So carry on. So how did you find soccer?
Yeah, so my friends got me involved. It was just one of the other sports we were all playing together. And I just fell in love with it. And more than anything, I excelled at it. It was just something that took all of my, kind of God-given abilities, and it just made sense. And I got good really fast. And I was known in my little town because I was the only girl playing every single sport. And sort of my parents, it was hard for them because they were always known as Lou's parents, right? They never got called their own name. But the soccer I took to it and started to just get better and better and better. And I played with all boys up until literally in my small town, high school started in 9th grade.
Okay.
So our high school was 9 through 12.
Did you run into resistance from the boys or their parents?
Never.
Never. So that you were well supported.
I was well supported and encouraged, and my coaches, I was blessed with coaches who were willing to be open enough to, have me come to tryouts, and then they would see my ability and be like, heck yeah.
Did you have any female coaches?
I actually didn't at that
I was
point.
going to say that would have been rare I would have been surprised.
I had no female coaches, and especially in the soccer world, none whatsoever.
Okay, so you went from what high school did you go to?
So, Land O'Lakes High School, which was,
Is it like Land O'Lakes the butter?
It is Land O'Lakes the butter. Yeah, that's not where the butter came from, but yeah.
Okay, so you're in high school, and where did you first get the idea that you might be next level possible? Because this is early.
Yeah, this is very early.
Right.
So next level was that I was trying out for the varsity boys soccer team.
Did they have a
ninth
girls'
grade.
team?
No.
Okay.
So it was not the JV team, but I was trying out for the varsity boys team because I was that good.
Where did you play on the pitch?
So at that point, I was like a forward midfield. Forward midfield.
So you were fast.
I was fast, and I wanted to score goals, and it was that kind of thing. But I was able to compete enough in ninth grade at that level to actually make the varsity team and get a little bit of playing time, which was just unheard of at the time. So yeah, that was kind of the beginning of it for me. And it wasn't until I hit about age 15 that I was sought after by a gentleman named Tony Fusco, I don't even know where he came from. To this day, I think back on it and I'm like, this guy came out of nowhere and found me.
So you're 15, you're about a sophomore at this point?
Yeah, just about, yep.
All right, so Tony Fusco finds you.
Tony Fusco finds me and a group of other girls, all in he really went far and wide, all in about 100-mile radius. He went looking for all of these girls that were playing with all boys, right? He just went on a hunt. And he recruited this team, this U16 team of girls, and we played for a club called the Black Watch.
Okay.
Right? It was called Black Watch, and our team, we were called the Heather, Black Watch Heather. That was my first all-girls team.
And it was a club situation.
It was a club situation.
All of this stuff was still in its infancy.
Yes.
It is a well-oiled machine now, but
Yes.
this was in its infancy. Okay, so you're playing in a club setting with Tony Fusco and your first group of young women.
Young women.
What was it like for you at that point, at 15, to suddenly be playing with all gals?
Yeah. It was challenging because it was different for me. And most of my relationships up to that point, honestly, most of my friends were boys. I didn't have a lot of relationships with girls because the boys were just who I connected with, and I was obviously playing all the sports. So it was also new for me socially because now I was developing, these wonderful relationships and friendships with my female teammates. So that was a new experience for me.
Were some of these girls from your high school as well?
No,
Okay,
none of them. We were from all over. So there was no one from my area. So these were all new friends, new teammates, new people I was meeting and coming together with. And it was an incredible experience for me, and it was probably one of the biggest transitional points in my life. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so now you are mid-high school, and you're playing both with the guys' varsity team and with this women's club team?
Well, here's the transition that happened. So during that aspect, around my ninth grade year, my parents went through a divorce.
Okay.
And so my mom and I moved from that smaller town of Land O'Lakes into the Tampa area, more into the city. Temple Terrace area. So I switched high schools.
Okay.
So now I'm in a bigger city with, more people. And by that time, the high school scene had sort of now started incorporating female soccer, especially in the bigger high schools.
We're now in the mid-80s.
Yeah.
Right,
correct.
okay, gotcha.
Because I graduated high school in 88.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so now you are playing on a whatever CIF out here. What do they call it in Florida? League play in Florida.
Yeah. I don't even remember what it was called.
But the league was developing, and every high school had a girls' team, and so.
Exactly, they were developing it. Now, here was the interesting part. Our club soccer was at such a level because that U16 team in our second season, we went on to actually win the first ever U16 national championship.
Wow.
Which was incredible. So we not only, won our state championship in Florida, we won our regional with the states in our region, and then we went to the nationals. So our club team was at such a high level that our coaches really encouraged us to not play high school soccer.
Right. That was the beginning of that.
Yeah.
That's probably front end of that. Okay, so let me ask you a question, though, because stories. Do you remember, as you reflect on that, that is a huge feather in the cap very early.
Mm-hmm.
to be part of a team that's national championship caliber. A, where did you play? Where was the national championship held? And B, what is one quick story about that winning that championship that you could share with us?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing.
Where did you play? Where was the game?
Okay, so it was in New York.
Okay, how
it was in
exciting.
kind of like upstate New York area, and that team was, one of the best teams in the nation. They were well known. They had a lot of caps in their feather and a lot of awards, around their necks. And we literally came out of nowhere. No one had ever even heard of us. So somehow this man put this team together, and what he was brilliant at is he was actually a football player.
Okay.
Big, kind of beefy dude, knew nothing about soccer, couldn't even play the sport, really. So ask me how this all came together, and I think mainly because his daughter wanted to play soccer, and somehow he just, he was a winner and he was a competitor. So he went out and found every coach in our area, the college coach at one of the local colleges, two local colleges. He brought these players, these coaches in to work with us because he really, once we got to a certain level, there was not much he could do to help us.
Sure,
right?
sure.
Get better.
He had a vision of how to manage it.
Without
completely
and I
understanding
need to
the
bring
sport.
these other coaches in to help these girls get to that next level.
That's fantastic.
And he went and found them.
So the
right?
daughter, do you remember her name?
Tina.
Was she
Fusco.
good?
She was okay.
Okay.
She wasn't as good as some of us, but she was okay. I know she didn't go on to have a college career. There were only a few of us that did. I was the one that left with the highest level kind of college recruitment out of the team.
Okay. So you have this game in New York, this championship game.
We're back to that championship game. Yeah, and we literally came out of nowhere. And so I think what was so amazing is that just we were such underdogs. And no one expected us to even have a chance of winning. And so we just went up and talk about grit. Like you have this book over here about grit. Mm-hmm. And I don't think I've ever seen such a display of grit from myself and my teammates for us to be able to pull this off. But we did, and to this day I can remember the celebration on the field when that whistle blew and we just looked at each other like, wow, we had pulled it off.
We just did this thing.
We pulled this thing off and it was incredible. And yeah, I'll never forget it. And I just can remember, like, we would pack ourselves into motorhomes, right? He would rent a big motorhome and throw the whole team in there. And we would do fundraising. We would go door to door selling donuts, right? Krispy Kreme donuts. Like, we would do everything we could to get the funding to be able to travel to these places with this team. It was just like this dream team.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
That's awesome. And you guys were all 15, 16?
Yeah, we were all the same, right around that same age. And so, once we accomplished all of that, then it's like, now what? And what's next for us?
Right.
And what was also brilliant about this coach is that he held certain trainings and put together certain camps where he would get college coaches to come, or he would enter us in tournaments that we knew were going to be scouted by college coaches. So he had a vision to figure out how to get us seen, how to get the college coaches to be able to see us play, which was pretty brilliant.
I had a similar experience with my college coach, with Lance Harder, who went on to be an incredibly winning coach at University of Arkansas. But Lance was the same, on the front end of all of this, and just these men, obviously, and there were women too, but these male coaches who had a vision and were just going to knock down doors to make sure it happened on behalf of young women. So Tony Fusco. So transition us from that incredible experience to being recruited again on the front end of Title IX and opportunities, and the NCAA sort of branching out for women's sports.
Yeah, it was interesting. So I did play one season of high school soccer my sophomore year, and it was, not a great experience. So I didn't play after that at all. And our team just continued to play at the highest level tournaments that we could. So senior year, recruiting comes along. I was recruited at the time. I think I was offered, and my memory on all of this stuff is challenging sometimes to remember exactly. But
quick sidebar:
yeah.
Did you give up? And this is important toward what we see with young athletes today. Did you give up all other sports? When did you?
Yeah, that's a great question, because that was pivotal for me. Probably around that age 15, 16. I was at this point where it was being explained to me by my coach and by other coaches who were working with us that if this is the direction you want to go, this is going to become a year-round thing.
And you were ready for that?
Yeah,
Okay.
you're going to be training year round. And in Florida, it's easy to do things year round,
Year-round, yeah.
right? The weather's perfect for it.
Right.
So our coach had said, I am going to set this up so that we have the top level coaching coming in and working with you. And it is going to be year round, and it is going to be a very big commitment. So if this is the direction you want to go, then you're going to have to be present.
How did you, and I didn't mean to sidebar, but this is important. How did you come to that? Did you talk with the folks? Was it a no-brainer?
For me, it was the sport I was excelling at the most. And it was the sport that I was getting, obviously, the most recognition. And when it came to looking at my future in college, it was really the only sport that I saw the opportunity to go. And I also, in a lot of this training that we were doing, had gone to some camps that Anson Dorrance was at.
Okay.
And so at the time, this is just when the national team was starting to come together as well. And you had UNC and University of Central Florida, UCF,
Right.
at the time. They were the top two teams in collegiate soccer, women's collegiate soccer. And so I knew in my heart that I had this burning desire to be the very best that I could at this sport. So I had made that decision when I decided, it's about 15, where I'm like, okay, this is the sport. This is the one that is going to do it for me. And not only do I want to go play in college, but I want to play on the U.S. women's national team. Because I was getting exposure to these players. I was going to camps where they were coaching us, right? I was watching them play. I was watching these games. And I'm like, wow, this is like the next step for me. This is where I could go. And so for me, in terms of the collegiate thing, I knew that I wanted to go to the University of North Carolina.
You knew that.
I
Okay, so
knew that.
before we go on to this, because
Yes.
this is the chapter that I'm really excited about. When you say you went to those camps, which is certainly a big thing for athletes today, right? Getting seen, going to camps. So that was relatively new back then.
Yes.
Showcased, getting
Yes.
showcased and meeting athletes. But share with me, as a young athlete who definitely had an intellect about her sport, and had made some decisions at that age. This is what I want. You're at this camp with these elite players. Dive in a little bit. What is it you saw that said, I want to do that? Was it their technique, their footwork, their communication with each other, or you? What is it that really struck you, Coach, about watching these elite players and knowing that you're in a situation where I have a gift.
Yeah.
I have the opportunity right now to learn something. So what is it about that experience?
I think what triggered it for me is that from a very young age, I had a father who was a high-level competitive athlete. He played semi-pro hockey, was a baseball player. So he was, the one that kind of instilled that in me. And I think I just genetically probably got it as well, that desire to compete. So I always wanted to be the best at everything I did. And there were a lot of expectations around that, expectations from myself, but I think also from my dad. But what I saw when I would interact with these players or watch them play was this level of competition that I just hadn't seen anywhere else, and this level of expertise. Like I'm watching, so the one name that will stand out for me right now was Michelle Akers. I don't know if you remember her.
I remember her.
Michelle
big fan,
Akers.
sure.
Oh my gosh. So she played for UCF at the time.
Okay.
Anson had tried to recruit her to Chapel Hill, but Rudy, I'm gonna forget his name. Anyways, at UCF, he got her, and I just remember she was huge, tall, like almost 6 feet tall, strong, and just owned everything in the air and was so powerful to watch on the field. She just dominated. And getting to be around someone like that and the energy that she exuded and the confidence that she exuded, right? That for me was so appealing. And I'm like, I want to play with players.
I want to
like
model
that.
that.
I want to model that, yeah. And I was a little thing, right? So I didn't have any of those qualities, but her teammates and just watching the players that were at like April Heinrichs in that day, she was like one of the best at UNC, and watching her play and how dynamic she was and doing things that I was like, wow, that is like the next level. And I know that I can get there. So I think I was just so inspired by being able to interact with these players at camps and things. I was like, I'm there. Like,
it is a big piece of being an elite athlete to be aware of what's better than you.
Yeah.
And to hold that out there as a carrot. Always. There should always be a carrot, right? You never quite arrive. All right. So when did you first meet Anson? We have some mutual stories about Anson Dorrance. Before I even met you, I read his book when my daughters were little. and my first foray into coaching AYSO, which I did for 16 years. But Anson's book was the first book I read. Neighbors gave it to me, and we were chatting about this before we started the program. But he's like a mentor hero to me in a way, and I'm so excited that this is our first interview, because what he pointed out to me in his book, what I read, stayed with me forever, and that was namely the impact that we can have as a coach when we recognize the difference between coaching men and women. In the
Right.
first few pages of Anson's book, What Makes a Champion, he talks about how the male of our species tends to be myopic in their athletic thinking. This is the implement, and I must be the one who scores. They tend not to be as community-oriented,
Right.
whereas women tend to work a little bit better together in a sense of community when it comes to playing sports. What did I say to you before we started? The guys won't pass the ball, the women won't take the shot, right?
Exactly.
It's too busy
Yeah.
figuring out who to pass it to. But so tell me, let's just dive into a little bit about your experience with Anson when you first met him, and then certainly just riff away, Lou, about what it was like to play.
It's just amazing, because when you think about the people who have made the biggest difference in your life, I mean, of course, my parents, come number one. They were amazing, and I couldn't have had a more supportive pair of parents. But Tony Fusco, number one, he's changed my life. And then the next one was Anson. So I got introduced to him because, again, I was getting to that age where I needed to think about what was next for me. Where am I going? Am I going to go to college? This next level that I want to play at. And so, of course, I knew who the top two schools in the country were.
And if I may, I'm going to interrupt one more time. For our listeners, Anson Dorrance is the women's head coach at the University of North Carolina, the winningest coach in NCAA history.
NCAA history of any sport.
Right. Games, tournament championships,
yes, all of
conference
it.
championships, national championships.
Yes.
This is the winningest coach in NCAA. So certainly somebody that you, were very, very blessed to be, to work with.
Yeah, he is an icon, I would say, in the world of coaching. And my first experience with him was, again, Tony put us in touch with these camps that we could go to. And he was also able to bring Anson in to do some clinics for us in the Tampa area. And so one of the local colleges put it on, and he came, and this is going to be a funny story because how this changed my life. I had a little bit of an attitude when I was young, if you can only imagine, Coach Kathy.
Shocker.
Shocker, right? Because I was always seen as the best, right? Because I was always the best, and I really stood out. So I had a little, ego thing going on. And, when I was out on the field, I was, talking back to referees and just being a little turd out there in the field. And so in working with Anson, having him come in and the different things that we were doing, and he was watching me play, and he watches everything, he just pays attention to all the details. When this clinic was over, he came up to me and he said, "You know what? You are probably one of the most talented players out here, but
I love this.
that attitude that you have makes you uncoachable.
It's going to get in the way. Okay.
And if you don't figure out how to fix that attitude, no one's going to recruit you."
Okay, he was just flat out direct.
Flat out direct.
And
Well,
you're-
that's Anson. He is anything but, he will say it how it is, right?
Okay.
And that's what he said to me.
So what'd you do with that?
Oof, it was like, bam. It was definitely a shock to me. It's one of those embarrassing moments where, wow, I just got put in my place. But it also really made me think. And it made me realize that if I want to play for someone like him, I have to do something about this. I have to adjust. I have to figure out what it is about myself that I need to change to be a coachable player.
Right. It can't just be about talent. We hear
Exactly.
this is more important now than ever, right? It's got to be about effort and dedication and teamwork and being coachable.
Yeah. Well, and for me, always being seen as the best, what I hadn't had experience with is realizing that there are other girls out there that are just as good as me, if not better, but I hadn't met them yet.
Right.
Right? So that was the piece to come. So, Anson putting me in my place in that and me realizing that if I don't figure this out, I'm not going to get the opportunity.
Right. Okay, so transition now. How do you land at UNC?
Right. So I do my work. I improve my attitude. I really work on the things I need to work on to get to the next level. It becomes recruiting time. I had spent some time visiting UCF because they were recruiting me, top two schools. I went to UNC because he was recruiting me. I got full scholarship offers from UCF and 3 other schools at the time.
What did you want to study? Did you know?
At the time, I really thought that I wanted to be a vet. So biology was kind of my area. Thought I was going to go to vet school after that. This was really challenging as well. I was hell-bent. I knew from that moment I had that conversation with Anson, I knew that I wanted to play for him. And I also knew at the time that he was also the national team coach at the same time as he was coaching.
Okay, good. Yeah, I was going to ask about that. So he was already making waves on the national.
He was the first women's national team coach.
He was.
He was the
okay.
very first. And at the time, when he took over the coaching job for the women's program at UNC, he was coaching both the men's program and the women's program. So if you go back and listen to his story, it was that he realized he was going to make more of an impact with the women than he was with the men, which is why he left the men's program and continued on with the women's program. And then he had both roles as the head coach at UNC and the women's national team coach. So he did that for a while. So for me at the time, I'm like, okay, if I want to get to the women's national team, the best way to get there is to go to the University of North Carolina and play for that man and have him watch me play every day.
Sure.
Because I'm going to learn from him what I need to learn to be the player I need to be on the national team.
That's the channel to the national team.
That was the channel.
Right
so
on.
I made that decision in my mind that was the path I was going to take.
Gotcha.
Recruiting-wise, my parents, of course, financially, we couldn't afford to go to any of those schools.
Okay.
So for them, they're like, yeah, you have 4 or 5 full rides here to good schools. You better choose one of those. Because at the time, Anson was not giving out full scholarships.
Okay.
Because he was trying to recruit the top players in the country, and he was doing a very good job of it. But in order to have the budget to do that, he couldn't really give out full scholarships.
So how did you manage it?
Right. So my parents were like, well, we can't afford. If you choose to go to the University of North Carolina, he offered me a partial scholarship. He said, I cannot offer you a full scholarship. I don't offer full scholarships, which, by the way, the very first player ever to receive a full ride, guess who it was?
Was it Mia?
Mia Hamm.
Yeah.
She came a couple years after me. Anyway, so I said, you know what? I will take out student loans for that first year or however long I need to until I can get more scholarship money from him. Because he said, you can work your way up to getting a full scholarship, but we can't do it for the first freshman, maybe even sophomore year. So I just said, I told my parents, I don't care. I will take the money from student loans. I will apply for grants because, there were enough grants out there. And so I did.
You figured it out.
I figured it out.
Right.
I figured out how to make it work.
This is lovely because this is still the story today, right? This is a huge part. Do you remember what tuition was?
No.
You don't have to. It's okay. I'm just
I do
curious
not.
because it's it's the huge part of what I'm trying to help young athletes do is figure out how to finance the situation.
I just remember when I looked at the bill at the end, I knew how much I had to take out in loans.
Right.
And it was thousands and thousands of dollars. But I also knew the student loan payback, the way they do it, they try to really work with you. And I knew that I would figure it out.
could figure it out,
I just
yeah.
trusted myself that I could figure it out.
Awesome. Okay, so let's talk about the 4 national championships and just maybe a little bit about what those 4 years looked like developmentally. What did you learn? A couple of big takeaways.
Yeah.
And then your transition to the U.S. Women's National Team.
Well, this was all very interesting because coming into UNC, it was a smack in the head because here I was rolling into a program that I was no longer the best player on the field. I was no longer the best player on the field, and I had to work harder than I've ever worked in my life up to that point, just to earn a starting spot on the team.
Right.
It was a lot. And coming in as a freshman, Anson was clear. He's like, I'll tell you what, you're coming in with a freshman class of 4 other players that are in your position. I was coming in as a forward.
Oh, wow.
Right.
And there were 4 other gals.
4 other
vying for
freshman
that
gals
spot.
coming in, vying for, starting time, and a little bit of midfield play. But so I had to really prove myself. And it was really challenging. And I would say, grit building, I never worked as hard in training sessions probably ever in my life. And it made games feel easy because our training sessions were he called it the cauldron. Okay, he built this cauldron.
Get things bubbling.
Things are very bubbly, and you will never work harder in any game than you will in any training session. So that's why we were so well prepared. But for me, being the player who was always the best player, to then I'm now just vying for playing time. That was a huge transition for me.
Right.
And, Anson was adamant, you earn your playing time here. So the other big challenging moment for me was he approached me and he said, here's what I feel. You're a good forward, and I think you will earn some playing time. But the other thing I think is that you could also be a really amazing defender.
No kidding.
An outside back.
Okay.
He said, I would like to train you to be an outside back.
Did you resist that?
It was, are you kidding me?
I know.
To go from the goal scorer who gets all the recognition to now have to play defense?
Quick sidebar, Lou, all my years coaching soccer, which is a sport I absolutely have come to love. I wish I could have played it. But one of the things I would tell my athletes is you come to a place in life where you realize you're either a toes athlete or a heels athlete. You either want to knock down their house or you want to protect our house. And I think that that's part of what is ingrained in us. I was a toes athlete. I was a get out of my way, like you. I think that's why we hit it off so well. Mm-hmm. All four of my children, the kids, are all, well, Cece was both, but they were defenders through and through. Even Rory, middle linebacker, right? They have a sense of, don't even think about getting by me. And that's something I think you come to know as an athlete. Mm-hmm. So for him to want to take you from being a toes athlete to a heels athlete, that's something.
It was something.
I can appreciate that you resisted that.
Yeah, it was something big. It was hard for me to make that decision to go with it, but at the time, I just wanted to be on the field.
Yeah,
I just wanted
you were
to
willing
be
to
on the
do
field.
what you needed to do to
and
get
I
on
wanted to be a part of that team, and I didn't want to be on the bench. I just didn't, obviously. And so I said, okay, tell me what I need to do. And that was the beginning of my transition to kind of my outside back position where I dominated. And I played every minute of every game. I never came off the field. And I just, Anson just taught me so much about what I was capable of that I didn't even realize. Right. So he just had this amazing ability to tap into our deepest levels of motivation and inspiration that no one else in my life ever had been able to. I was a self-motivator, right? Yeah. No one really motivated me as much as I did myself because I knew what I wanted to accomplish. This man told me what I was capable of accomplishing and knew how to tap into finding that deepest level of grit and motivation and desire to get there.
It's really amazing. It's a wonderful formula when you have the athlete and the coach and the connection. Yeah. So step us through the first and the fourth national championship wins.
Well, the interesting thing is
because you were on four, Llewellyn was on four national championship teams.
I was there during a time when we won 4 national championships in a row, and the entire time I was there, we only lost 1 game.
That's incredible. Yeah. Who'd you lose to?
To the University of Connecticut.
UConn?
UConn.
Okay.
Yep. And I believe that was my senior year.
That's wild.
Yeah, so
that's a whole other story.
Whole other story.
Podcast.
Yeah, I'll get there. But anyways, yeah. So my first year there, to be a part of a national championship team. I mean, for me, that U16 national championship was, my first real big win. But to then step into this environment and my first year, my freshman year, to be a part of that team and have playing time, and I remember, the Shannon Higgins and, the Carla Wordens and the people that were before me, the Tracy Bates and those guys, and they were my mentors. They were the seniors at that time, and, to be a part of that team and that culture that was there because we were bonded. Sure. From the moment I got there as a freshman, I never felt anything but welcomed into a family. Like I had an instant support system the moment I showed up on that campus, and that was something that Anson built there that was so incredible. And so to win that first national championship with that group of girls was incredible for me.
Who'd you beat? What was the score and what stadium?
See, these are the things you're going to ask me.
Okay,
I remember these details that are really hard because I don't remember. I have this interesting memory of the things that I remember sometimes in great detail, and then other times not.
It's totally
okay. And not that each championship wasn't as important as the next, but it's interesting how I have found I've become much more of a present moment And I don't think as much about, I don't know, it's weird.
Right there with you. I get it too. I get it. But because I got to be on 3 national championship teams as well with Cal Poly, with track and field.
Yeah.
And that's a whole different ballgame because you're waiting and you're watching the score develop over the course of 4 or 5 hour track meet, right? It's a very different kind of a win. But I understand. I get it. And you're blessed that you have, I consider myself the same. You have this cachet of so many wonderful stories that it's hard to remember the details.
It's hard to remember the details. But I will tell you, I do remember that one loss very well. It was in a downpour because it's the only time we ever lost. And I think maybe it's hard when you win that many games. It's not that they all blend together, but in some weird way, they kind of do. And so the standout is, it's harder to find that moment that stands out because there's so many of them that stand out, and I think what was big for me, the first to the last, was I was a captain. Carla Overbeck had left and I became the sweeper back. And I had that captain band on my arm winning that last national championship.
That means a lot, I bet.
That meant a lot, and that Anson saw that, and that is what he helped me develop that I didn't necessarily have before, right? Because I was an individual, I was all about me kind of player, and I learned how to become more of that team player, and what he pulled out of me was this level of leadership that I didn't even know I had.
It is a powerful thing when a mentor sees something in us and helps us see that within ourselves. It's a huge piece of what athletics can provide, what these stories are all about. I want to talk about your transition from. Can you tell us a little bit about the U.S. Women's National Team experience?
Yes. So obviously that was one of my goals from the moment I entered UNC. That was always there. That was always, that thing I was looking for. Ultimately, was when was I going to be ready? When I would have meetings with Anson from time to time, and he knew that was on my agenda, that I wanted to be a member of that U.S. women's national team. And so he would, I'd go into his office, we'd hire me, he's like, nope, you're not ready yet. When am I going to be ready?
Okay, so you graduated UNC and stuck around to train?
No, I was my senior year, and I was still because he was still coaching the team, and I was still I feel like I'm close. I feel like I have to be close. So, I got that call up actually my senior year.
Oh, okay. So this is all part of your collegiate
all part of, as I was transitioning out of college at that very end of my college career, I got that call to come and train with the team.
Okay. That must have been exciting.
That was, for me, that was kind of just the icing on the cake, right? It's wow, everything that I had worked for, I have accomplished. Every goal I set, it's I finally got there. Yeah. Was the feeling.
Bit of a pinnacle.
Of being called up.
Yep.
Yeah. It became something different after that, which we can talk about here. But just getting there and showing up at that first training camp with the best players in the world. Right?
Yeah. I want to hear briefly about that because I think that's an important piece, and I'm already going, you're coming back. We have to talk more in depth about some of these things because these are profound. I think all of our stories are important, but you've had a really profound journey, Lou Ellen, in a sport which we now see is completely dominates, right? Yeah. Every kid plays soccer, and you were on the front end of what has made that sport such a terrific opportunity for many young athletes to have an athletic experience and to move forward with that ability and their gifts or whatever. But so what you started to allude to, was there something negative that happened with the U.S. Women's National Team?
Well, it's not that it was negative. Here you have to remember, again, 2 years after I'm there, so, here comes Mia Hamm. And I can remember Anson pulling us all in and going, I'm just letting you girls know, I've never given out a full scholarship to anyone, ever. I'm going to be giving her a full scholarship. I truthfully believe that we're about to see the best women's soccer player that's ever hit a field. So he knew this. He saw this in her. I had never seen her play. I didn't even know who she was up to that point, right? But of course, he's been recruiting her. So just, imagine I get to play my last 2 years of soccer with this woman who ends up being basically the Pele of women's soccer.
Right.
Every single training session, every day, this is who I have to defend. right? So
So is it her footwork, her speed, her intellect?
all of it.
All of it.
She
She's
had
the whole
it
package.
all. Okay. Her and I used to always fight for the fastest player on the team because, we would do sprint competitions and one day she would win and one day I would win. And, we would go, most of the time she would probably win more than me, but I was, always right there with her, right? I had to defend her. She's the girl I had to defend. She had the best move. She was the quickest. She could score goals. She could, take players on. She had everything. She was the full package. And so imagine how that's what I get to train with every day. So of course that made me one of the best defenders, level up that I could be. So, when I stepped on that field with the national team and I got called up, I felt like I belonged. That I got there for a reason. I should be here,
You earned your
This
spot.
is it.
Yeah.
I earned my spot. But what happened to me was this was like, okay, now what? What am I going to do with this? And I think I stepped into an environment where, there was every single player on that team that I'm playing with is probably as good or better than me. Mm-hmm. It was that next level up. And I think for me, I almost hit a little panic mode. A little panic mode. And I played as hard as I could and I trained, but I think I was a bit intimidated, being at that level. I worked as hard as I could, and I remember there was just a time when we were going off to a tournament in Sardinia. I only played a couple caps with the team. I had played a couple caps because Carla Worden had left on pregnancy leave. She left the team.
Tell our listeners what a cap is.
Yeah, so a cap is an international game, an official international game that you play in, and that counts as everyone you do counts as a cap. And so I had taken her spot as the sweeper back while she was gone, and I thought I did quite a good job. Played the position well, played in a couple matches, and this big tournament was coming up where the team was traveling to Sardinia, and this was going to be my first international travel with the national team. And the team hadn't been named yet. The roster hadn't been set yet. Carla was just coming back in from her pregnancy leave. She hadn't even really trained with the team that much. But the roster came out, and I was not.
You weren't on it? Oh, boy.
I was not on it. Carla got the position back like that, And I think that just took the wind out of my sails.
Sure. Who made that? Did you talk to Anson about it?
Of course I
course
did.
you did.
I tried. He has his reasons for doing things. And if I look back now and I say, should I have gone over Carla Overbeck, Worden Overbeck? No.
Right.
Of course he made the right choice. She was amazing. And was I a better player at that time than her? No. But in my mind, I had put in the work to be there, and I should have gone. That was in my mind at the time, right?
So it's what a coach has to do to weigh the talent, the lineup, the experience, all of it has to be a part of a formula that they have to make with the 11 that they're going to put on the field, right?
Yeah.
Now let's move forward because you've become a coach. Coaching is, you are a stellar and elite athlete, and it's such a privilege to hear your stories. So I want to spend the next little pocket talking about how all of that experience, what your journey toward being a coach, and now the experiences that you're having as a coach again of youth in soccer. So how did you move from that very last play, that very last game, the decision to say, okay, I'm done now, and I'm moving forward to build some sort of professional career from this point?
Well, so at that time, it was really challenging as an elite women's soccer player to have a career after college.
Yeah, we're looking at the early 90s at this point?
92, I graduated, right? And I played with the national team that last year a little bit, 92, 93. And so for me, I'm asking the question, what's next? So there were no professional opportunities as a professional player. Players now can go, oh, okay, I can go overseas and play for this league or that league, or, we have, all the opportunities for these women to go play professionally. Now, I didn't have any of that. There were no opportunities really. The only next opportunity for me would have been to get into coaching.
Right.
So here I was going, okay, what do? I didn't make the cut for this team. I was making an internal decision. Do I keep trying to train and play and see if I can get that spot, or do I move on?
This is a huge thing that I think a lot of, we'll get back to it, but a lot of student athletes should consider. I say it all the time, you're a student athlete. You will hang up your cleats one day, right? And there has to be life beyond sport. So much emphasis goes into the journey toward that potential thing at the next level, D1, D2, D3, or NAIA. And I'm hopeful that these stories remind athletes that ultimately there will be the last game, there will be the last meet, there will be the last opportunity, and there is life beyond.
Yeah.
So how did you sort that out?
Yeah, it was a big challenge. I made the decision to step away from soccer, and I think part of it, the decision was made because I was, again, angry at the sport a bit. I was kind of probably a little angry at Anson and I felt like this didn't turn out the way that I thought it was going to, so I'm going to move on. What's next for me? And that was a really challenging decision to make, and figuring out where to go next was the next challenge. Coaching would have made great sense at the time with my background. I could have gotten into that, but again, I wanted to get totally away from soccer.
You did.
I was burned out. I was done. I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't live at home with my parents and, be able to train for soccer. It's like, I know I got to go on my own now. I got to go figure out what I'm doing with my life. So then it was about kind of going back to school a bit, figuring out what made sense for me next.
You just decided that being a vet was not for you?
Yeah, I decided that wasn't the way I was going to go.
What did you get your degree in?
I still got my biology degree.
Right.
Yep. And so the interesting thing that I got as a minor was I got a minor in dramatic arts.
No.
Of all things.
Get out.
Of all things.
Did we miss you on the stage at some point?
Yeah, it was interesting because in high school I loved doing my little bit of acting, but I could never be a part of any of the drama things because of soccer.
Because of sports. I
couldn't
got to
do
do
it.
one play.
That's it. Yeah, right. That was it. I couldn't dedicate the time to both, of course. And soccer was much more important. So it came back around in college when I took this really cool class called Acting for Non-Majors.
Oh my goodness.
And this weird little passion popped up. So when I was done with
comedy,
soccer,
drama, musicals, what's your genre?
well, I mean, honestly, it was I got into plays and just like dramatic, plays, and I applied to, because of my minor, I applied to this acting school in New York and got in.
You've got to be kidding me.
Nope,
I've known you for almost 20 years and I didn't know this.
I know it's a weird little thing that happened. So I just sort of followed that, went to acting school, and it all comes full circle because in that world, I then got recruited as a stunt performer.
Oh, gosh.
Right? Because of my athletic background. So it came back to, okay, you're an actor, but you have this athletic background. You should get into stunt training. So I went into stunt training for a couple years and then got into film and TV. I decided rather than be East Coast, I'm going to go West Coast. I'm going to Hollywood. Took myself to Hollywood.
I had no idea.
Yeah,
This
I know.
is
Went
awesome.
through all this, did stunt work for about 3 years. And then really the profession that then came from there, which made a natural sense, was personal training.
Got you.
So this was where I got to take my background in athletics, my career as a soccer player, and turn it into working with people in, getting them healthy, getting them strong, getting them fit, other athletes. I did sport-specific personal training with kiddos and young athletes for a while. And then, that just sort of transitioned from there.
Amazing. Okay, we have to have a whole other podcast about your life as an actress
Right.
and stunt woman. So you moved up to the Central Coast and you found your way in club soccer.
I did.
So tell us about coming to San Luis, finding your way with Bob Gallarno and Storm and Fire, and then building forward as a healer and a coach of adults through
Yeah.
crisis.
So I'll, backtrack a little bit and say that during my college career, Aaron Anson always used to pull us into his camps that he would run there at UNC. So he would pull us in as player coaches to work with the kids. So that's when I first started working with youth.
Just like you got to see Michelle Akers.
Exactly how I got to see Michelle Akers. And that was when I really realized, hey, I really enjoy working with these kids. It's really fun to teach them these skills and, the knowledge that I have of the game, and really watch their faces just light up, and the excitement build. So that's where I first got kind of introduced to it. So then over the years, I worked other camps, other traveling camps for the UNC program, and other camps over the years that I did. And then when I turned up here in SLO in 2006, I just had met some people I was a personal trainer at Kennedy, and I met some people in the world of soccer, and they were like, hey, you should get involved with the local club here. That's how I met Bob, and we, had a great, yeah, that's how we had a great conversation, met him, and he said, yeah, you got to come out and work with me and the teams. And so that's kind of how I got reintroduced to the youth soccer world and coaching club again.
Right. Okay. So that was about the time that we met. And of course, Bob Galarno was kind of like a Tuska, who's the guy in Florida for you? He was sort of
Fusco.
Fusco.
Yeah, Tony Fusco.
Bob was he helped to really develop a strong club sense here on the Central Coast, right?
Indeed.
So which is still a very strong club program. Okay, so now you are you're building a business in life coaching, healing. Share with that how you.
Yeah, at the time, really personal training had kind of taken over. I mean, personal training was the one thing I always went back to. Wherever I was in my world, when I was at acting school in New York, I did personal training to, pay my bills. I worked at local gyms and things like that. When I came out here, Kennedy was where I started, and then I built my own personal training business from there. And then, that just transitioned into, me realizing what people really needed on a deeper level to sort of live their best lives and be the healthiest they could be. Personal training was one aspect, that physical aspect, which was the easy part for me, personal training and teaching people how to work out in a gym and, get their body strong and mobile. And that was like the easy part for me. But what I started to realize, the missing link there was two pieces. It was number one, the nutrition piece, and number two, it was the mental piece. The mental piece. It is like, this is the piece that I go back and thank Anson for, because he helped us develop this level of mental health and wellness and confidence, and this ability to sort of step into any environment, step into any challenging environment, and just know who we were.
He was cutting edge on that whole thing, wasn't he? Yeah, especially for
He really was.
women.
And I realized working with a lot of these clients I was working with, they were just really missing that mental confidence, that mental piece of being able to push themselves through challenges and through adversity. And, again, a lot of this, coming from what I had experienced, I just thought, wow, I need to figure out how to coach these people, not just physically, but also mentally and emotionally. They really need help in this area.
You did some work to expand your own training and your own knowledge about that.
Yeah. So
field.
I think for me, I realized I had reached the pinnacle of my physical health through the world of soccer. I was as healthy as I could be, as fit as I could be. I was at a point in my life where I don't think I could have been any fitter. And so that piece for me always came easy. Yeah. And even the food piece for me even came easy because I had to eat a certain way to maintain, right? So I knew what it was to be a healthy eater. So coaching people in that was easy. But what I realized was the emotional and mental aspect. That was something I had to kind of go back and go back to school and learn how to teach that part.
Teach it,
how
right?
to teach that part,
Exactly.
right? And in the process, what I got to learn was a lot about myself. And even though I felt, hey, I have a lot of confidence when it comes to certain things, there were a lot of issues, one being anxiety, one being, being kind of very hard on myself, having these expectations of myself that coming from that highly competitive environment.
Exactly.
And now it's one thing to have those expectations in a highly competitive athletic environment, but then when you step into the real world, to have those same competitive expectations on yourself doesn't work. Doesn't work as well.
It can be potentially very destructive.
Very destructive. And so I was finding myself dealing with a lot of anxiety. And then I'm working with these clients and realizing, wow, like I see the similarities and I feel where these people are struggling. And I realized I had this level of empathy and this ability, I think, to help these people, but I needed to go get some training to figure out how to do this. And in doing so, I took this really deep dive into some things that really was all about me learning about myself first.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, because ultimately I think, and this is where we're going to go with this, we're going to move on to what you're doing now with youth again, coming full circle. the power of, we've seen it in our adult lives as women. We've seen this shift in the narrative, which is the whole mind, body, spirit thing.
Yes.
Right? Is focusing not just on the workout, the knowledge of how your body works, lifting weights or, putting in the miles or learning the skill, not just what's happening in the refrigerator or down the grocery aisle,
Right.
but that piece that happens when we're sitting quietly by ourselves and, the negative self-talk,
That's it.
all the things that we know that young women go through and young men go through. And so it's exciting to me that you are now back working with high school student athletes again.
Yeah.
So tell us about where you are now, Llewellyn, with coaching a local high school girls program.
Yeah. Well, honestly, all of that work I did on myself and the things that I realized, the missing pieces, I can't even tell you how life-changing it was for me, because I was almost like half a person for all those years, not realizing what I was truly capable of internally, and building this relationship with myself that allowed me to discover things about myself that I never even knew, and abilities that I had and capacities that I had internally that I never knew were there. And when I started working with the girls again, the young players, I just started to realize, wow, like I never had this growing up. I never had anyone telling me that there was this internal world that I could work with.
We didn't talk
Right?
about
We
it.
didn't talk about that stuff. And for me, it was, I just had to shove all of that down to be the best that I could be. And again, just work from expectation to expectation to expectation. And for me, mistakes, no, you don't make mistakes. Or if you do make mistakes, it's like, okay, I have got to figure out how to fix that mistake now. Otherwise, I can't make a mistake again. Right. And the fear of making mistakes and how that was just being pushed on all of these student athletes, right? Yeah. The fear of making a mistake. And so I just started to realize how I can help people, and especially these kiddos, learn that we have to make mistakes. If we don't learn how to honor our mistakes and how to grow from those mistakes, then there's no way that we are going to prepare ourselves for what's to come. And there's no way we're going to get better and improve. So as I started working with these kiddos, I learned that, wow, I have this ability to help them learn about their inner world and how to explore what it feels like to make a mistake.
How did it come about? Share. How did you land? You're here working with adults, and you got yourself specially trained to do this healing work. And then we talked a little earlier about the impact COVID had on your business.
Yes.
And then the transition back to, it's a huge decision to go from having a private practice and working with adults in a one-on-one.
Yes.
To diving back into the environment of high school athletics.
Well, yeah, again, I'm glad you said that, because there's kind of a missing link in there. But as I was running my business and, learning all about myself and gaining all of this knowledge, I really didn't have any intention of getting back to coaching. So honestly, in the time gap there, as I was building my own business and doing this work on myself and realizing this whole internal world that I was working with these adults, at the same time I'm building this business, someone came to me, a dear friend of mine, and her daughter was just starting on a club team, and they didn't have a coach. And it was for CCU, one of our local clubs. And she's like, Lou, is there any way you would think of coming back to coaching and coach her team? Just maybe even for this one season, right?
They took that hook.
Yeah, they did. And I'm like, you guys, I just don't know. I'm trying to build this business and it's going really well. And, I'm working with these people and it takes a lot of time. And I just don't know that I would have, because I knew the time commitment to coach again. I don't know if I have it. She said, you know what? If you would just have this conversation with this one gentleman, his name is Omar Rodriguez, and he's covering the team right now, but he has other teams, and he really needs to find someone to take this team over. Would you just consider having this conversation? So honestly, here's another one of those pivotal moments. I get on the phone with this man, Omar, and literally an hour and a half later, I am convinced that I need to come back to coaching these kiddos. I had one of the best conversations that I had had probably in the last 10 to 15 years.
Awesome.
About kids and coaching, and these young girls especially, and what was missing in the coaching these days and what these girls really needed. And he just really had an insight and a vision about, what he wanted to create with these girls. And so that was the reason why I came back. Yeah. And I only intended to do it for that one season. And then, as you know, what started happening was I started realizing how I was shaping these young, right, at the time, 10, 11-year-old girls. And the things that I was noticing was happening in the improvement, and not just as players, but the connections and the relationships and the confidence that was growing inside of them. And so I came to this point where I realized, wow, I think my purpose that I thought was about working with adults and helping them, right, tackle these challenges in life and become not only physically but mentally and emotionally well. I think all of that has been for the purpose of being able to bring this energy piece into working with the youth.
So they can have a better footing and maybe not need your services when they're adults.
Right, exactly.
So the high school is absolutely blessed to have you, I'm sure. Tell me now that you're back into it, is this your second season with SLO?
No,
With high
so
school?
here's, again, I had no intention of going high school. I
Right.
was just very content working with the club teams. I went from coaching one team to two teams, and Omar then, came out and asked me to help him start this club. So we now have a new club called Joga Bonito Central Coast.
Oh, wow.
And so I had no intention of doing the high school. Well, I'm building these relationships with all of these parents. And I'm coaching their kiddos. And of course, a lot of these younger girls have older siblings who are now stepping into the high school environment. Well, it had been known that the high school had gone through several coaches in a row, and there was no one who was really kind of staying there year after year to really build the program.
Right.
And the spot opened up once again. This was just last year. And I was encouraged by all of these parents, hey, you should apply for this job. And I'm like, I just don't think I have the bandwidth. I don't think that's something I want to take on. Anyways, after, enough nudging, I said, okay, I'm going to go ahead and apply. So I did. Yeah, it was just this past season. So I applied for the job. And as I was saying to you earlier, I had a great interview, went in for the interview. They loved me, said best interview we've had for a coach in a long time. Thought the job was going to be mine. And then again,
Went another direction.
it went another direction.
But
And as I said, yeah,
But you offered yourself as an assistant anyway.
I did.
What
I
a
did.
gift. What a gift to those girls, man.
Yeah, and amazing how everything that has come around, I had so many parents from the high school group come to me and say, wow, it has been such an amazing experience for my daughter on this team having you there. And
You were probably a really good balance to the head coach.
exactly, yeah. And reinstilling, I think, some passion and motivation in these girls that they hadn't had before. And that, for me, getting that kind of feedback, not only from the parents, but also from the girls, like their appreciation for having me there, that just feeds my soul.
So tell me, I'm going to ask you what you see this last season with them. You've got 15, 16, 17-year-old girls now. I want you to share with me the difference in the talent from the last time you were coaching or around this demographic, and some counsel for them. What do you see that you wish for them based on your experiences as an athlete at that level? And some of these girls may go on to next level play, not likely to be elite like you. That's not a diss. That's just remarking on your prowess. But what do you see, Lou, in your position as a mentor? Because you are, I can't tell you, having been a coach at that level and being in the classroom on the regular with this age group right now, they're struggling.
Yeah.
Right. So to have people like you in their lives, especially the young women, for you to model for them what's possible, for you to model for them what it is to hold your head up, but also have a high bar. What have you seen? What's your observation been coming back to this age group, and what do you wish for them?
Yeah. And I think coming from coaching the youngers, starting at you're 10, 11, 12 years old, and they still just have so much joy for the game. They love it, and they show up at, practice training sessions just like, this bright light. Give me more, I'm here, and they just throw 100%, 110% out. What I noticed in shifting back to the high school is all of a sudden there was a big shift in energy, and a lot of these girls, they felt as if the weight of the world was on their shoulders. They showed up and they weren't, I feel expressing that same joy and love for the game that I was seeing in the little ones. And I know I would hear conversations in them so worried about, obviously schoolwork and the things that they had to, live up to there, keeping their GPA up, all of the, just high school relationships, the social aspect of just being a part of high school and a team. God, the Instagrams and all that stuff that, like, they're always worried about these, things that are coming out on the social media, and keeping up. Right. And then there's, what's next for me? College level. Am I going to be recruited to a college? Like, is it even possible for me to play college soccer? And I was actually blown away at the level of talent of this particular team this year. When I first saw them, I showed up at training session. I'm like, wow, there's some high level players here. Like, I was really loving what I was seeing. And I was so surprised when I heard from a few of these players that they're like, yeah, I don't think I'm going to play in college. And I'm like,
did they have a why? Did they tell you why?
Yeah, they just didn't think they're good enough.
So this is what I see, and this is why I like to start to wrap this up.
Yeah.
What's important to me with Athletica is one of two things I see with these young adults, and this is the perfect example of that. They either have had so much smoke blown up their backside, they think D1's going to come calling.
Right.
Which isn't not the case anymore,
Right.
or they just don't know how good they are,
Yeah.
and they don't know what's possible.
They don't know
So
what's
that's
possible.
why situations like this podcast, and getting the word out to athletes like that. I know I see those girls in school, and then they go out for track in the spring, and they're really good at the jumps, and they're really good at hurdles, but they definitely have a shot at
Yeah.
soccer or volleyball. We have, that there's a lot of talent out there that I think young athletes don't fully embrace because they are in constant comparison in social media
Yeah.
with others that are around them. So.
Yeah. Well, and I think the other thing I see is that they just have so much on their plates that there is a level of burnout. I also think that I see experiencing as they just start to get into that high school level. The parents have them playing, all kinds of different sports at the same time, on top of school, on top of the social life, on top of everything else. I think the expectations are so high and there's so much for them to keep up with that I think it's hard for them to find a focus.
Did you find yourself in this last season coaching them? Did you find yourself sorting your training or your formula for the program to deal with that?
I mean, I think this being my first year with them, I think I was trying to just encourage on every level that I could to have these girls see what the possibilities are and what they're capable of, and having them really look at things a little bit differently and, take time for themselves to really look at what they really want, what is really important to them. And I think sometimes they're trying to accomplish things because their parents want them to,
Right.
and they think they should, rather than it being something about really what they are passionate about, what they really want to do.
As I developed my philosophies over the years, and this is the perfect interview to bring this up, it's really important that women, I think more male coaches are getting attuned to this, but it's really important to me that young female athletes have female coaches who can help them touch base with their why. I talk about this a lot. Why are you out here? I think women tend to participate in athletics for reasons that are more communal.
Right.
Than men do. Men typically, historically, of course, I talk about this a lot. Organized athletics came about because we became more civilized. Right? When times of war became fewer and farther, the stretches of peace, there was a need for an outlet. So organized athletics came about. So that's for the male of the species, right? The female doesn't quite have that intuitive drive. So organized athletics is something they choose,
Yeah.
right? And so the choice, the why, tends to be, fitness, friendship, being social, elevating your game. And now, of course, it's scholarship.
Right.
I need to do
Right.
this to be able to play. But understanding your why and having you as a mentor for them to, like I say, to show them what's possible.
Well, and also my why in this is big because it's not just about the sport. Like Omar and I, our biggest thing is that we're not just developing the best players. here in our club, we're developing the best humans.
Right.
Like there's so many other aspects, the percentage of these players that will go on to play at the highest level is so small, but that we want them to realize that what they can take from this game of soccer by playing it as long as they love it, as long as they can, is that they're going to develop skills that are going to help them later in life to be successful at anything else that they step into.
Very true.
If they can do it in this sport, then they can do it anywhere else in their life, right? They're building these social skills and these internal skills of how to manage with challenges and how to make good decisions, right? And how to support people in an environment, other than just as a skill set. How can I emotionally, support my teammate or, my colleague, whatever it is? And these are important skills to learn. How to be a leader, right? How to instill leadership in people. All of these things are what's going to help these young athletes be successful in the rest of their life.
Exactly.
And that's more important than I think any of these few players that might make it all the way. Hey, yes, go for that. But if we can have, 50 players that leave and become successful in other careers and in their lives in general and are happier and healthier, right, all around, wow, have we done our job? Absolutely.
Absolutely, yeah. And then in the process, you don't even know it. They don't even know it that they're writing their stories.
Right.
They're writing the stories that they're going to remember and reflect on, and that are going to shape them down the road.
Yeah.
Coach Lou, thank you again, and come back after your trip back east.
Will do.
All
Okay.
right, let's
Thank
bring
you
it
so
in.
much.